What is going on, everybody? It's Matt Marchese, also known as Islanders Daily, your home from everything for the four-time Stanley Cup champions, New York Islanders. In today's episode, it's an exciting one. We continue on with our keys to the season. We're going to be talking a little bit about prospects and who to keep an eye on and who to watch when you can. We're going to be taking a look back at the COVID bubble hockey season now that is 5 years on, as time sure does fly. And today is our Kyle Palmieri outlook for the season. So to get things started, our first key to the season is an obvious one. The Islanders need to improve their special teams. Their power play was horrendous, and their penalty kill was just as horrendous. And we'll talk a little bit about more of that, but the Islanders have made changes to the assistant coaches. They added Ray Bennett and Bob Bowner as assistant coaches for the season, and they will be taking over those duties. So we do have new coaches in the areas where we definitely needed new coaches. And it's good to get those guys in there, and hopefully they can help us out. It's going to be, difficult, but this is something the Islanders need to improve on if they want to make the playoffs. It's a miracle they've even been able to make the playoffs some years with how horrendous their power play has been in recent times. So this is one of the biggest keys besides staying healthy is improving the special teams. Now, if you just take a look, our power play percentage was 12.6%. That is horrendous. Horrendous, 12.6%. And that was 31st in the NHL. So we were in the bottom two of power play, but it gets better. It gets better. Our penalty kill percentage was 72.2, which puts us also at 31st. So we're bottom two in both power play and penalty kill. And that is not what needs to happen. That is a recipe for disaster, and that's what was occurring with the Islanders. But that's not even the saddest thing when you look at it. Last year, the Islanders only took 208 penalties, which is the second least in the NHL. The second least. The only team who allowed less penalties was the Golden Knights, who allowed 197 penalties. We allowed 208, and the next closest is the Red Wings, who allowed 230. So we weren't even taking penalties, and yet we still could not stop it. It was frustrating when you barely give up penalties and you're still losing games because your team cannot defend on the penalty kill. And that happened with the Islanders. It was simple, disaster. It was a disaster. 31st. That's simply pathetic. It's almost mind-boggling on how horrible their special teams was. And I know when fans were watching last season, we could tell how bad it was. But just looking back on it now, it's way worse than I remember. Way worse. I thought we were taking penalties left and right for some reason last year, and we barely took any. That's how putrid our penalty kill was. Our penalty kill was so putrid that it ruined everything else, So improving this is a must. And that is exactly what the Islanders need to do if they want to make the playoffs. Because if that doesn't change, the Islanders will not sniff the playoffs. This is a necessity to improve it, and I hope they've worked on it. I hope they figured out things they need to do to improve it for this upcoming season. So now transitioning away from that, we're going to be talking about, a little bit about our prospects and which ones to follow and where to follow them. So obviously we have Schaefer. I'm not going to put him here because I am assuming that he will be on the team this year, so he'll be easy to follow right on the Islanders. Now, next up is Cal Ritchie, another guy who should be easy to follow. We just acquired him in the trade deadline last season. He will be starting the season in the AHL unless somehow he fights away and makes a roster spot for himself in the NHL, which I don't think is likely until maybe a little later in the season. But again, an easy guy to follow who will just be in the AHL. So just be sure to keep up with the Bridgeport Islanders. Hopefully they're an improved team this year with new head coach Rocky Thompson. But we'll have to wait and see because Bridgeport is a whole nother problem that I don't even want to discuss right now after just talking about the power play and penalty kill. But hopefully things improve and Cal Ritchie will be there. Of course, number 3 I want to talk about is Cole Yzerman, another guy who will be easy to follow. He'll be playing college hockey still at Boston University. Last year in 39 games played, he had 25 goals, 11 assists for 36 points, a pure goal scorer. And I'm so excited that this guy's a New York Islander. I still can't believe he fell to us in that draft. That is so crazy to me. But having him is definitely huge. So be sure to follow Cole Yzerman. And along with Cole Yzerman, we have Kamil Bednarik, who is also there on the roster. And he is also on Boston University. In 40 games, he had 2 goals, 17 assists for 19 points. Definitely not as big as a prospect as Cole Eiserman. In fact, he's probably, I'd have him just outside maybe our top 10 prospects. But definitely just somebody to follow because he's on that team with Cole Eiserman, and it does make it easier where to follow him. So, yeah, I would definitely say that. And then, of course, we got Victor Eklund. This guy's going to be a little more difficult to follow for us in America because he does play in the SHL, the Swedish Hockey League, for Djurgården. So just keep up, check every weekend, see how Victor Eklund's doing, because I think Victor Eklund's a star. I've talked about it before. I think Victor Eklund has potential to be a superstar in the NHL. So for him falling to us is crazy. I'm not talking just top 6. I think Victor Eklund could be that guy. But that's a whole nother thing. So definitely keep a track on Victor Eklund from Djurgården. And right there with him is Keishon Aitchison, the guy who was drafted right next to him. The guy's drafted back-to-back. He will be in the OHL with the Barrie Colts. Last year for the Barrie Colts in 64 games. He had 26 goals, 33 assists, 459 points. In fact, Keishon Aitchison was just suspended in the OHL. Just crazy thing. And, makes sense. If you take a look at his penalty minutes, last year he had 88. The year before he had 126. So this dude is definitely, he racks up those penalty minutes. So it's funny talking about how the Islanders gave up the least or the second least amount of penalties in the NHL to talk about Keishon Aitchison, who he takes penalties. He takes penalties. So that's a thing that he will definitely need to clean up when he gets into the NHL is those penalties because that could be a problem. And of course, one of my favorite prospects actually is Danny Nelson from Notre Dame, a guy who was kind of not seen as a big-time prospect, has slowly been growing and getting better in Danny Nelson. He plays for Notre Dame, 30 games in his freshman year. He had 9 goals and 14 assists for 23 points. And just last season in 36 games, he had 13 goals, 13 assists for 26 points. He is a good two-way forward, Danny Nelson. When I've watched him at Notre Dame, he does the job. He is a player you want on the Islanders. A strong two-way game that he really does well. He's almost kind of like an Anders Lee type player. I don't know if his goal scoring will, be there, but he's definitely a guy to keep track of at Notre Dame, Danny Nelson, who is quickly grown up. He was ranked number 92, best prospect in hockey. So yeah, he's definitely a guy that we need to keep track of because Danny Nelson, he won't be like a superstar or any means, but he could definitely be a middle 6 NHL player, and he could be solid, and we could see him as soon as, I think we could see Danny Nelson in a year and a half to 2 years. I really think that he has potential to just be a strong, solid NHL player, Danny Nelson. And here's another one that's a little interesting, but just to keep track of because it's another college hockey player, is Quinn Finley. He plays at the University of Wisconsin. Just a solid, player, Quinn Finley. I really like what Quinn Finley does. He was great last year in his sophomore year at Wisconsin. In his first year, 36 games, he had 10 goals, 6 assists for 16 points, which is, a solid freshman season. But last year, 37 games, 20 goals and 20 assists for Quinn Finley for 40 points. Talk about a year by Quinn Finley, and I'm not sure a lot of Islander fans realize how good of a college year Quinn Finley had. Now, it doesn't always translate, of course. Sometimes those things don't translate, but Quinn Finley has quickly grown on my radar as a player to keep track of, and I think you guys should keep track of Quinn Finley as well. Now, going into our next topic, we're going to be talking about a little bit about COVID hockey, which happened 5 years ago today. In fact, a game happened 5 years ago today when the New York Islanders beat the Philadelphia Flyers in the second round in Game 7. So definitely really cool to be able to talk. And I just wanted to kind of take a quick look back at the COVID hockey because that was such a wild time in the bubble when we were playing in Toronto and eventually Edmonton against the Lightning. But yeah, that year, it was tough. We were really kind of falling off a cliff there towards the end of the season in March. And it was looking nerve-wracking, right? We were contemplating if the Islanders would even be able to make the playoffs when that was happening in COVID. But, the Islanders continue to fight and maybe got a little lucky with COVID happening. I know that's horrible to say, but the Islanders were really on a decline, and COVID happening allowed them to reset. And then we got into that bubble where we had to play the first, weird, 5 versus 12, 6 versus 11, 7 versus 10, 8 versus 9. And we played the Florida Panthers in the first round as the 7th seed against the Panthers, who were the 10th seed. We won 3-1. I think we really kind of dominated the Panthers. I don't think that was ever too close. We won our first game 2-1, won our second game 4-2, lost our third game 3-2, but then dominated them, winning 5-1. And now we know what the Panthers turned into, man. They've just gotten better, but definitely a real good year, or a real good series for the Islanders to really dominate the Florida Panthers and win that series. Next round, we played the Capitals, and again, just straight domination, eliminating the Capitals in 5 games. And now here's the fun one. The Philadelphia Flyers, we were up 3-1 in that series, winning 4-0. We then lost the next game in overtime, 4-3. We then won 3-1, and then we won 3-2. We were up 3-1, and then back-to-back overtime games where we would lose 4-3 and 5-4. So all 3 losses to the Flyers in that series occurred in overtime, which is just crazy to think about. One, if we were able to just score a goal in overtime, that does not become a close series whatsoever. And it did become close, but on September 5th, the New York Islanders did beat the Philadelphia Flyers 4-0 in just straight domination. That was not even a game. The Islanders came out there with something to prove and just straight dominated the Panthers that game. And now, unfortunately, we all know what happens next. We ended up losing to 6 in Tampa Bay. Simply depressing. And then we would go back the next year, play Tampa Bay again, and lose in 7. Just could not beat those guys, unfortunately. And it's tough because the Islanders would have won back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. They would have been back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, the Islanders, if they were able to just beat the Lightning in those 2 series. Because I think we beat the Stars. It's definitely a tougher challenge, but I think we beat them. And then I am 100% confident we beat the Montreal Canadiens. So it's just hard to look back about. But yeah, that COVID time was wild. I mean, we had that ping pong tournament where J.G. Pageau was crowned champion and all that. Just a crazy time in sports, crazy time in hockey. But yeah, happening, 5 years ago. It's just fun to look back and talk about it. So yeah, that was certainly cool. Definitely something that was just a fun thing to look back on and everything. So yeah, that happened not too long ago when you really think about it. I guess it's it's 4 years ago. I forget the exact. COVID was such a crazy time. But yeah, it was 2020-21 season in the NHL. Or no, was it 2019? Yeah, it was 2019-2020 season. Yeah, so 5 years ago for the Islanders. And yeah, just crazy time. And then next up is finally our final topic of the day, which is our Kyle Palmieri outlook on the season. And now Palmieri, he just signed that 2-year deal with the New York Islanders. And Kyle Palmieri, you know what you're going to get with Kyle Palmieri. He's just that guy, He's that guy who you can rely on. He will be a solid player for us. He's going to be older, of course. Kyle Palmieri's getting up in there in age. But you know what we get last year in 82 games? He had 24 goals and 24 assists for 48 points. The year before, he had 30 goals and 24 assists for 54 points. Now, I do think Kyle Palmieri regresses a little and gets maybe in the low 40s or the high 30s in points, depending on where he slots into on the lines. If he's on the second line, I think we see another 40 to 45 point season from Palmieri. If he's on, third line and they just kind of move things around, it will be about a upper 30-point season for Palmieri. So there's not much to talk about Palmieri because he's just a solid NHL player, Palmieri. You always know what you will get from Palmieri. And yeah, that's all we got to do. Just let Palmieri be Palmieri and he'll be solid. Of course, he's getting up in there in age, but I still trust Palmieri to do his job and do what he needs to do. So I easily think Palmieri will score 20 goals again this year. He'll have about 20 to 25 goals this season. And, assists, I do think that he won't maybe put up as many assists. I think maybe in the about 17 to 20 assists for Palmieri, I think, is obviously what we're going to get. I think Palmieri regresses a little with age, but hey, I hope I'm proven wrong. And I hope Palmieri goes out there and simply dominates this year. And honestly, I think Palmieri could dominate this season, and hopefully he does. Hopefully Palmieri does what he needs to do, and I think it's even possible where Palmieri could come in there and become a whole different player and grow as a player. And, maybe he has something to prove now. Maybe he has something to prove, Palmieri, and try and go back, turn the clock a little. Is this the year where Kyle Palmieri turns the clock around and really starts, you know, like I said, turning the clock around. I don't know. I don't know. We will have to wait and see. But it's certainly something. Yeah, it was the so yeah, we'll have to hope and see. And then going back, COVID hockey, it was the 1920. I'm getting all my years mixed up. COVID was a crazy time, just a crazy time. COVID was, but yeah. So hopefully Palmieri performs well, and hopefully everything happens. But that's about all. That's about all I have for today's episode. I thank you all for tuning in per usual, and as always, let's go Islanders.